I think she liked her surroundings. I think she chose to be where she was. She had a beautiful, clean house that was very comfortable and casual. It wasn't trying to make an impression or make a social connection.
I think what I remember most is just the feeling. Whenever we were inside, it was very calm and peaceful, which, our house, there was a lot going on. But I remember at Grandma and Grandpa's, it was calm and peaceful. And I remember Grandpa's roll-top desk. He had one that rolled up and it had all those different compartments. I remember the living room was like blue, or a blue carpet. I don't know. I just remember there's blue, and there was a picture on one of the walls. It was boys playing Crack the Whip. And I remember we went out in the yard and tried to play Crack the Whip because I didn't know what that was, so I saw that picture.
Their house was wonderful because when I was there, it was just my sister and I. We'd gone to visit, and we had the house to ourselves in a way because Grandpa and Grandma were busy, and it wasn't anything like our home. It was a grandma's house, and the study was all wood, and Grandpa had a beautiful wood desk that it was a roll top. Never seen those before. It was gigantic to me, and this glass case full of books, and they were all yearbooks, and he was in them. He was famous, and he had all this hair. Like, it looked so weird to me because Grandpa looked so handsome bald. Couldn't imagine him having hair. I mean, he looks so good now.
I remember going in her bathroom, her pink bathroom, and the smell of clean soap. And every once in a while, I'll smell that smell, and it just smells like Grandma, clean and crisp. And I love that pink bathroom.
I remember the kitchen was kind of the main area of action. We ate out on the back porch when we stayed there, because there were so many of us. But I remember just things always going on in the kitchen.
And in the mornings, we'd wake up early and we had healthy breakfast, cracked wheat cereal, and Grandpa was always there kind of helping fix it. And he was very involved in helping get breakfast on the table for all of us, and like dripping the honey on our cereal and things like that. And Grandmother helped us. We learned how to work and do all kinds of things there. I remember lots of dishes because of all the people that would be there, and she didn't have a dishwasher, so I remember standing at the kitchen sink with her washing dishes and looking out the window over their backyard, and there'd be so many dishes. And we had a dishwasher at home. It was sort of a pain even just to load it, but we had to wash and dry them at Grandma's house. But even if it was just simple breakfast when not everybody was in the kitchen at the same time, but she still, everything was laid out beautifully, and certainly, dinners and then something special like Thanksgiving. She always made a beautiful table. My grandmother was very frugal. She lived through the Depression, and I remembered in her kitchen, everything was beautifully organized, and she had these fun little drawers that she would let us play in them when we were small. But she kept all the Tupperware things down low so that while she was busy in there, we could just open a cupboard and pull things out, and she let us, create whatever we were doing with all these things on the floor that then of course had to be hand washed when we were finished, but she was willing to have the extra work just to let us enjoy that. But one drawer, when you pulled it open, the little plastic tabs that they used to close bread bags, they twist them and then they put the tab on. There was a drawer full of all those tabs, lots of different colors, but just one little narrow drawer just full of every tab that came off a loaf of bread that went through that house. And so, which seemed magical as a child, all these fun colors, and they're like little poker chips or something to play with. They were great, but she did. She saved and found uses for almost everything. She was very ingenious.
And so Allison would have been 6 and I would have been 7, and we stayed in the room with the red carpet at the far end of the hall in her house. And I still remember the curtains. They were pretty gauzy white curtains.
But we would run around the house, and Aunt Jeannie had a red carpeted bedroom, which we never even imagined existed. Red carpet? We thought she was so cutting edge. What an amazing aunt.
I remember the room with the red carpet. It was this deep, deep red, and it had white sheer curtains on it. And I remember I got to stay inside. I got to stay in that room one night, and I felt like royalty. It was, because it was such a beautiful room. I remember the cellar going down like in the basement where the washer and dryer was, and I remember there was bottled fruit lined up, which Grandma's bottled cherries were the ultimate. I don't think I've ever tasted anything better than that. And bottled apricots. I had some at Aunt Mary's house. I remember the last bottle we ate of Grandma's. I remember doing that when I stayed with Aunt Mary.
And in Grandma's house, every tree was a different fruit so that she could make fruit cocktail. And so whenever you went to Grandma's house, she would go down into her cold basement, and it wasn't full of spider webs or scary things that were all piled up that looked like monsters. It was full of beautiful, colorful, glass-jarred fruit cocktail with little happy red cherries in it, which was really neat.
And we would make up plays. Grandmother had a closet in the basement full of costumes because I think her parents did a lot of drama, and so some of them were from then and others were things that she'd made for Aunt Jeannie when she was dancing. So it was a really fun place. There was always things going on.
I remember Jill and Mark coming and playing with us, and Heather. And we found a trunk downstairs full of wonderful dress-up clothes. And I remember playing hours, and they were beautiful dress-up clothes. They were like original costumes. I remember like a flapper dress with little, and I remember hats and gloves, and we'd go out and play with them, and we had so much fun.
And Grandma had dress-up clothes. That was the nicest thing about Grandma's house, is that Grandma understood that we were children. That we didn't have to sit on a white couch and cross our ankles and listen to Grandma. That wasn't our experience. Our experience was there was a basket of dress-up clothes in the room, and they were cool. They had things we'd never seen before or tried on.
Sometimes the Evans would come at the same time, so Maylene would be there. Yeah, that's when we got to the stage. We'd pull out costumes in the sheets and make up some big play that we'd put on the patios there for everyone else. They'd come sit on the picnic benches and watch us and applaud to whatever silliness we'd made up. But it was, so that was fun.
And Grandma would always read us stories every day during our quiet time, because we had to have a quiet time after lunch. But it never failed. She would fall asleep. And we would not. But I remember I loved the stories. I still remember her reading us Little Black Sambo. And, oh, she had the most magical books. I loved all of her books.
During the afternoon when it was hot and we were a little tired from being outside, there were always, or in the evenings, there were always books on the shelf she'd encourage us to read, from fairy tales to history, things like that. And she would bring books back from the library where she worked and for us to look at too, and kind of suggest ones that she thought would be good for where we were. And
Grandma, I loved to hear her read children's stories. And I remember specifically the story of the Jum Jills. And I remember we made the recipe. We made the Jum Jills after. But that's a story that every time I see that book, it's Grandma. And I think of just her children's books. And, you know, she'd get the discarded books from the library when she worked there, and she would send those to us. And
when we lived with her that one summer, we would go with her to the library because she was a librarian. And I loved that. That was one of my most favorite times of the week, because she'd go work in the library. I don't know if she was cataloging books or what she was doing, but we could play. We could read all the books and play with all the old school supplies and the globes and the big dictionaries. And she had an old book of wallpaper samples that she gave to us and let us cut up. I still remember the glorious feeling I had of all this paper I could play with and cut up and create something. And I remember making little collages out of it. And I just loved going to school. And it was so much fun being in the school library when nobody else was there, because you could pretend and do all these fun things and play with the books and read the books, and it was so much fun. That was a wonderful memory. So she would have been still working during the school year during that time. Right, so, see, I'm thinking that was 74 that I went.
But she was, I think probably I saw the drama most in her storytelling. That was my favorite memory. It was at night. If you could talk her into it, grandmother would come into the room where we were sleeping in and tell stories. She had lots of stories that she'd tell us, and the way she told them, just you couldn't not listen. You just wanted more.
But I remember her, we have tapes of Grandma telling stories or singing songs, and the one I remember was the carrot seed. You know, I watered it and pulled the weeds. I'm off to carrots grow from carrot seeds. But I remember her telling us stories and hearing her do stories on tape as well, so that we could enjoy them even though we lived far away.
And when they got up there, they went to one bear trap, and there wasn't anything in it. Just some birds had been eating on the meat that was there in the bear trap. But in a little while, they went to another one, and there wasn't anything in the second one, and they had 4 traps. And the fourth one didn't have anything in, but the third one they had put down had a great big bird. Not a bear, but an eagle. This was such a big eagle, you could never imagine how big it was. So they went down and told Ray's father, and that was Uncle Will, and he came up with them, and then went back up into the mountains on their horses to where this eagle was, because it had broken its leg. An eagle's leg is not very big, and the bear trap had come down so hard on it, and it was not as strong as a bear, so it had broken the eagle's leg. And so Uncle Will took a lasso. You know what a lasso is, don't you? Like you were using a cargo. He took this lasso rope and he lassoed the eagle and tied down its wings so that they would to keep it from trying to fight and everything, so they could get the trap off its foot. And then they took the trap off its foot. Then they took some strips of cloth that Aunt Julia had torn off of an old sheet, and they wrapped that all around to hold it tight on the eagle's leg. And then they took the eagle down to Parowan, and they had a great big creel there where the cattle were, and they put the eagle in the creel. And when they did, though, while they had the eagle caught like that, they spread its wings way out, and it measured 16 feet. She said it was the biggest eagle she'd ever heard of.
Grandma was so free with her praise. I still remember very specific items that she praised me for. I remember her praising me for saying my prayers. And I still remember that. I was 7. That would have been that summer when she said, you say your prayers, I'm so proud of you. And that has really stuck with me. What I do remember, my mother had Allison and I, we made them in primary, books about Jesus that we read during the sacrament. And I remember her praising me, Mimi, I'm so proud of you for being reverent and thinking of Jesus during the sacrament. When I was in college and I stayed with her either over a break or right before, I'm thinking it was over a break, maybe Thanksgiving or a holiday. And I was exercising, and I remember her praising me, I'm so glad that you're exercising. And she would always, if her friends were coming over or I was introduced, she would always say something, this is Mei who, and then she would say some praise or some good thing about me, and I just thought, wow. Isn't that interesting? Those are the things that I remember as she praised the meaningful, true things, not passing outward things that wouldn't matter in time. And yet, even though Grandma was very organized, she was very frugal, she was very economical, but Grandma was very warm and loving. And as a child, being away from her parents that long, I do not remember, it was the first time I had been away from my parents, I do not remember any homesickness. I just remember being loved and accepted and praised, and just having a tremendous amount of fun that summer. It was wonderful. It's one of my best childhood memories.